I'm Professor Woolridge. I recognize a number of faces here. This is the beginning of a semester-long Wall Street camp. This is a program that has been supported by the college. Dr. Spanier is a big proponent of this, and Robin Stevens, who's with Career Services in the Business School, Paul Poisson, who's with the MBA program, have been very much involved in terms of designing and putting this program together. The objective is this, to help you people get better prepared to compete for jobs on Wall Street. This is something I've been doing for over 20 years here at Penn State, and as you'll see, I'll talk a lot about what's gone on in the past, what students can do to better prepare themselves to compete for these types of jobs. So Robin is going to be, will run the program that we'll have in 2 weeks. We'll focus on things like resumes and that sort of thing. Paul will be part of the program next month, where we'll bring in some Wall Street people and talk about interviewing and competing for these jobs, preparation, that sort of thing. I want to give you an overview of a number of things. One thing, an overview of Wall Street. I'm going to talk about our competition, how we've done over the years in terms of getting jobs. I'm going to talk about things that you should be doing. One thing we're going to do about this program is at the end, I'm going to show you, we're going to have an angel group. If you're going to be part of this program for the semester, you're going to have assignments to do. You're going to have quizzes to take. This is all about accountability. We want to make sure that people who go through this program are better prepared, but also you have to be engaged and you have to work yourselves at it. It's not something we're just going to hand you, okay? So I'm going to run through this. We'll be done in less than an hour. Basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk a little bit, give a little background of Penn State and Wall Street, kind of where we've been over the last 20 years. I'll provide an overview of what Wall Street is. We're going to focus somewhat on investment banking positions. Most of the people end up starting in investment banking and moving on to hedge funds, private equity, that sort of thing. And finally, I'm going to talk about things that you should be working on in terms of preparing yourselves to compete for these positions. You know, if you look over the last 20 years, this past year has probably been our best year I've ever seen for our placement of graduates on Wall Street. We've had a number of developments in the business school over the last 7 or 8, 9 years. Obviously, the development of the trading room has helped in terms of preparing students to compete for these jobs. The Nittany Lion Fund as well has helped because of the engagement you have, the experience you get from managing money. But over the last 20 years, I don't think I've seen a better year than the past year in terms of students getting jobs. I always have heard, you know, students will come to me and says, will complain. He says, I can't get a job. You know, I can't. Wall Street firms don't interview here. I can't get a job on Wall Street, and that's baloney. I think in many ways you have a better chance of standing out here than you do at many other schools in terms of being able to establish yourself here. To take on responsibilities, to get the type of training you need. And I think in many ways it's easier to stand out here than maybe more prestigious schools, private schools, Ivy League schools, where you got tons of people who are fighting for these jobs. One thing we find, our students very much compete on skills and determination. You know, we don't have many history majors from like a Princeton. Princeton will have kids in history and English get jobs on Wall Street. But those kids don't know how to take apart financial statements. They don't know how to do quantitative modeling and that sort of thing. Our students compete on skills. There's no doubt about it. And a certain determination that you want to get that job. What I want to focus on in the next 45 minutes or so, how can you best compete for those jobs? Now, what is Wall Street? Well, in the United States, for the years, you know, basically we had very divergent financial institutions. You have insurance companies, and insurance companies tend to offer insurance companies. Depository institutions like banks, they were basically alone. They didn't do other financial services. You had the investment banks and brokerage firms. They were by their own themselves as well. And finally, you had this huge area of investment companies, money managers, pension funds, mutual funds, that sort of thing. They were off on their own as well. And basically, the intersection of these is what we call Wall Street. until about 10, 15 years ago, these were like separate industries in the United States. However, over the last decade or so, we've had some degree of convergence. And the Citigroup company is probably the one that has the most has brought together, you know, the Travelers Insurance, Citibank, Solomon Smith Barney, and asset management. So you've had this convergence in the financial services industry. But whereas 10 years ago, when Citigroup first started doing this, everybody thought that this was what Wall Street was going to look like in the future. It hasn't really turned out that way. And I'll say a few things about that. Anyhow, what is Wall Street? Well, Wall Street's a lot of different things. It's not just investment banks. When you think of it, you have investment banking companies like Merrill, Morgan Stanley, Lehman, Goldman Sachs, Bear Stearns. You have banks/investment banks. You know, you have Citigroup, you have J.P. Morgan Chase. You know, you had Chase Manhattan Bank, J.P. Morgan, now they're combined. Wachovia has become a bank/investment bank. Bank of America as well. They all have a big presence in investment banking, but they also have a big commercial bank behind them. On the right-hand side, you see universal banks, and that's how banking is in Europe, where you have like UBS, Warburg, CS First Boston. They have banking, they have commercial investment banking, they have insurance, they have asset management as well. Now, beyond that, you also have the investment management side like BlackRock. You have mutual funds like Fidelity and Vanguard. Private equity has moved into this area. Insurance companies are a big player on Wall Street. Money managers, financial advisory firms. You know, some students take jobs at like PricewaterhouseCoopers, that sort of thing. You have the regional or niche firms like Legg Mason, Raymond James. And finally, you have the big new player, which are hedge funds. There's over 6,000 hedge funds. More and more, I find students taking jobs with hedge funds. But basically, there are very many different routes to go in terms of what we call is Wall Street. It's not just the investment banks. It's many, many other players. Now, where they really match is kind of one way to differentiate them are the sell side of Wall Street versus the buy side. On the sell side, you have primarily investment banks and commercial banks. They create, make markets, and sell financial products. So they're on the sell side of things. The buy side has the banks, mutual funds, money managers, insurance companies, hedge funds, other financial entities, and they usually buy, hold, trade financial products. But the intersection of all these things is what we call Wall Street. By the way, we're going to have this presentation up on our website, on our Angel website, so you don't need to take too many notes. But you'll have to know this for when you take your exam in here, okay? Now, another way of looking at, and to focus a little bit on investment banks, investment bank is very status oriented, very much oriented about who is where. You know, you have the bulge bracket firms. This is the highest level of investment banking. You have those in the middle who haven't quite achieved this status, but they tend to rank lower on the league tables and that sort of thing. And finally, you have the regionals, where they usually have pieces of do investment banking, small-scale mergers and acquisition, that sort of thing, more in different regions of the country. But very much Wall Street is about status and where you are in terms of this pecking order of firms. Now, we're going to talk about investment banks. A lot of the folks come in investment banks because that's where most of the jobs start. You know, you look at our graduates over the last 10, 15 years, most of them started at a Merrill Lynch or something and then end up in a hedge fund or a private equity shop or something like that. You know, we're going to talk about what the primary market is in investment banking, where you're really creating product, and the secondary market in sales and trading, where you're trading that product back and forth. Now, if we look at a typical investment bank, and this would be Merrill Lynch, this would be Goldman Sachs, that sort of thing, generally there's three different areas of work. One is what traditionally is called investment banking. This is where you do underwriting of securities. You create new securities. Companies go to the investment bank. They want to sell some bonds. They want to sell some stock. They do IPOs. They do mergers and acquisitions. This has been the most prestigious area for people in terms of investment banking. This is the high roller side of the shop. This is, in the old days, they called this the white shoes end of Wall Street. Now, to get jobs there, it's very competitive. To get jobs there, they care about your grade point average. To get jobs there, you're going to start and you're going to work 120-hour weeks. This is, you know, the investment banking side, traditional, the underwriting, this is the most prestigious side of the business. They care. They want to see a 3.8 or 3.9 grade point average. They want to see you taking all those accounting courses. This is clearly the tougher end to get in. But in recent years, we've consistently placed people at Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, J.P. Morgan on the investment banking side. 5, 8 years ago, we couldn't even get our students couldn't even get interviews at Goldman Sachs in investment banking. Now we're getting placements there a couple a year. But this has always been, you know, and this type of thing, this is acquired. If you take a job on this side of the business, you're pretty much working a lot. You're working in teams, working on deals. You're doing some traveling out to your customers, that sort of thing. But a lot of your time is sitting there. You're putting together pitch books where they're going to go out and pitch a bond deal to a big company or something like that. As an analyst, in your first 2 years, you're spending a lot of time putting these things together. You're working for an associate who's an MBA, probably from Harvard or Stanford, and you're basically a slave. But you know, a lot of this time is sitting there, plugging away, doing models, putting together books. That's traditionally what we call investment banking. Now, sales and trading is more oriented to the market. Sales and trading can go different ways. You can be sales to institutions, to individuals, sometimes called private wealth management. Trading involved where you're either supporting your salespeople in terms of they want to buy or sell large blocks of stocks or bonds. Market making where investment firms make markets in securities where they trade for or proprietary where you actually do trading for the firm's accounts. You know, this type of position is a little more exciting. Every day is a little more exciting because you're real close to the market. The ups and downs, a day like this is a pretty tough day if you're in the market. This type of work, they don't care as much. You don't need that 3.9 grade point average. They want good students, but you know, you have to have more ideas. You have to be more in tune with the sales and trading side. This type of position, they consistently hired, and again, it can be in New York and be elsewhere. You know, you don't have to be in New York to do all the sales and trading stuff anymore. The asset management side is even a little bit further away from the market. You know, this is where you're basically investing money, whether it's retirement portfolios, that sort of thing. There you're involved with management, you know, as a sector analyst, where if you're an undergraduate, you go in in a 2-year program where you start as an analyst. Maybe you're in a sector. Your hope is that down the road some point you're going to get some stocks to manage and that sort of thing. But that's going to take probably 5 to 8 years before you go into portfolio management. When you look at what an investment bank traditionally looks like during the breakdown, it's going to be corporate finance, which is traditionally investment banking, sales and trading, which is really making markets and trading in the markets. When you see the trading floors, anytime you go to an investment firm, they're going to show you their trading floors. That's where that type of activity occurs. And finally, asset management is where they're investing money for the long term, investing in retirement funds, 401k plans, that sort of thing. So that's what they tend to look at. Now, if you look at Merrill Lynch is broken down. On one side, they have their global markets and investment banking. On the other side, they have global wealth management. Now, obviously, Merrill Lynch is the biggest they have more stockbrokers. They have a lot of people who are out dealing with the public in terms of assisting them in the management of their money. Now, if you look on the investment banking side, and this is fairly typical on investment banking, so they have equity capital markets deals with the stocks, bonds, mergers and acquisitions, looking at different companies and industry sectors, leverage finance. That's where they're doing their investment banking. They're creating securities. They're doing underwritings, okay? That is their investment banking side. On their global markets, they have fixed income, commodities and currencies, and equities. This is where they're doing their trading, okay? Now, in the world of Wall Street, there has to be a breakdown between investment banking and markets because of some of the problems that have occurred in the past. But if you look at Merrill Lynch, they break down investment banking, sales, and trading that way. Now, they also have their global private client services. They have 15,000 stockbrokers, or financial consultants, they call them. So that's their advisory system. That's a big part of Merrill Lynch. It's a big part of, you know, if you look at a Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan, they don't have as many. They tend to go for higher net worth individuals. Merrill Lynch goes a little broader into the marketplace. And then you have their asset management side. This is where they invest money, more for the long term. BlackRock obviously is a big part. They own half of BlackRock. That's an investment management company. They invest retirement portfolios, that sort of thing. So that's just the structure of Merrill Lynch, which is typical for more of a traditional investment bank. Now, why kind of the focus is, we saw earlier, Wall Street involves a lot of things, everything from insurance companies to hedge funds to everything. But why focus on the investment banks? Well, one thing is they're very active recruiters. They were here today. As you know, Merrill Lynch is here today. They have what are called two-year analyst programs, where you go in, you expect to be there 2 years. As it turns out, in recent years, that has changed. Most are hired from their internship programs. So, you know, the idea is when they hire interns, the whole idea is to get them and keep them on. And most of the people they hire full-time come from their intern programs. They have very formal training programs. Those training programs are highly valued. It's one reason why, if you look at the hedge funds and that sort of thing, they tend to hire people away from Merrill Lynch or Goldman Sachs, mainly because of the training you get and the work you do and the people you work with. There is great potential for future opportunities. When you come out of these two-year programs, maybe it's three-year programs, as it turns out, there's lots of opportunities, because part of what you do in those 2 or 3 years is you network a lot, you get to know people at other firms. Basically, you're working on where your career is going to be 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road. Now, career paths have very much changed coming out of these programs. And by the way, these two-year programs are in investment banking, they're in sales and trading, they're in asset management. So they have them across the board. And they have them within these different areas. You know, in sales and trading, they have them in equities and fixed income. They have them in commodities. They have them in derivatives. I mean, there's lots of different opportunities here. And we'll talk a little bit later about kind of, as a student, what you ought to be thinking about, what you ought to be working on, because there's a lot of different opportunities. It's not generic at all. One thing I have noticed, a big change, is career paths have really changed. It used to be very standard. You went to Merrill Lynch, you went to Goldman Sachs for 2 years. After 2 years, you went back and got an MBA. Everybody did it. That was part of the rule. And part of the deal was that was a 2-year job. You knew it going in. Now, more and more, I hardly see. I have one former student I can think of in the last 10 years who is now in an MBA program. It used to be they'd all go into MBAs after their 2 years. Now, after 2 years, many times the firms are asking them to stay on, or they'll go take a job. Maybe they'll stay another year or so, then they'll go take a job at a hedge fund. Maybe they want a quieter life, so they go to private equity. Or maybe they go to the buy side. They'll go to an investment fund or money manager. But clearly the career path of students who leave has changed. But the key thing is getting into that 2-year program, and after 2 years, everybody's looking to see where you're going to move next. Okay, what are they looking for? Well, for our students, clearly our students compete on skills. They want very good financial computer communication skills. You know, you got to know how to, obviously, you got to be pro at Excel. You got to understand, you know, you got to, it really helps. You got to, they're looking for problem solving. They're looking for people who can get things done. one of the things you have to do is you've got somebody who you're working for, they have an MBA, they need a project done, they need it the next day or the next week. They need things that can get things done. You have to be able to work with people, and you have to be willing to work long hours. Now, people in the investment banking side are going to work much longer hours than the people in sales and trading or the people in asset management. But generally speaking, you're going to work long hours. Now, I talk to students about what they should do in terms of how they should position themselves. First of all, why do you think there's a tremendous amount of interest among students to get jobs on Wall Street? Why? Money, right? One reason is money. What else? Prestige, right? What else? What's that? Exit? What do you mean? Well, get it. Where are you going to be? Your future, right? What else? Excitement. One thing, the markets are very exciting every day. What else? I think there's one other thing. I think you find it all the time. You tend to work with exciting people, bright people, fun people, right? You know, Wall Street has always attracted a bright set of people because it's money. And it's all about whether, you know, managing money. And it's exciting, it's fun, you got, you know, the markets change. People, you talk to people who've done this for 25, 30 years, they talk every day is exciting because every day the market is different. And you don't get bored with it. And you work with bright people who are a lot of fun. And you tend to work with a lot of very successful people too. One thing you'll find about, like, especially in this business, they like people who are athletes. It turns out the competitive nature of it, that sort of thing, that always goes along well in terms of, I think, of something to sell as an individual. Okay. Now, let's talk about what you should start thinking about when you look for a job. You want to work on Wall Street. One thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to tell you a story which I call Napoon's Law, which is a great story because I've seen over the years I've dealt with students here and some students do it great, they do it the right way, and students can get jobs who I never would have thought could get jobs on Wall Street if they do things the right way. Certain things I tell students, you come to me, you want to get a job on Wall Street. Wall Street's all about a story. Whether it's a stock, whether it's an investment idea, first thing you have to do is figure out what your story is, okay? You got to figure out what your story is. What are you selling to them, okay? So the first thing, if you came to me, I'm going to say, what are the 3 things that separate you from everybody else here? Now, that's something that's in here someplace, right? But you got to tell me, what are the 3 things that separate you from everybody else? Why 3? Well, you need at least a couple of you need several things, but no one remembers 6 or 7. So I say, I want to know the 3 things that separate you from the rest of the world. And then I want 5 examples of each of those. By the way, remember I told you you're going to have some homework assignments? It's going to be your first homework assignment. I want to know the 3 things that separate you. Just wait, don't worry about it. You don't have to write it down. But you think about it. Now, what do you think kids tell me when I give them that assignment? What do they tell me? Hardworking, yeah. Give me 5 or 6 examples, right? What else? Determination. Extremely determined, right? What else? Interpersonal skills. They're team players, right? Give me 5 examples, right? And you need good examples. You need good examples. People say, I'm a great leader. Well, tell me about it. Give me some examples, right? Because one thing that's going to happen is all this stuff has to show up on your resume, okay? It's got to be on your resume. Like, people ask me, well, what do I do things there? One thing is I'm extremely perceptive. Extremely perceptive. If I'm driving down the road, the 5th car behind me is a cop, I know it. I have never had a speeding ticket. Okay? Right? What else? I tell them, whatever I do, whatever it's done, it's never good enough. You need a graphic story. On Sunday afternoons, I like to wash my car. This is a contact sport. There's blood when I'm done, right? You got to do it. It's being a perfectionist, right? Whatever you do, it's not good enough. You got to do it. But you need stories like that because that's part of what you're selling, right? So one of the things you're going to have to do, one of your summits, you're going to have to give me 3 things that separate you from the rest of the world, and then I want 5 examples of each, okay? Everybody got that? That's on your to-do list, but we'll get to that later on. Your resume matters. Now, Robin's the pro at resumes, but your resume is so important, and it's got to come across. And your 3 points have to show up in your resume. In 2 weeks, Robin's going to talk resumes with you, and she's going to give you a good idea of what you have to do, what it has to look like, because that determines if you get the interview. It really matters. These people really matter. We'll talk a little bit later. You've got to know the business, the firm, the job. But commitment means preparation, desire. I can't tell you the number of times I've had my former students on Wall Street call me because I sent them a student, and as it turns out, their response is, you know, Joe wasn't committed to this. He wasn't committed to a career on Wall Street. You know what they were really telling me? Joe wasn't prepared. That's what they're saying. You know, they'll say, oh, he really wasn't committed to this thing. Well, guess what? You know what they're telling me? He wasn't prepared to interview. And that's what we're going to be working on with you. Okay, key considerations. Network, network, network. There is no, you talk to anybody on Wall Street, the key thing is you develop a network. That network is you meet people and they introduce you to other people, they introduce you to other people. The key thing you do is when you meet people, you have them convinced that you got it. And then they're going to introduce you to other people. And all those people become a part of your network. Because you create opportunities through your network. And you never stop networking, okay? It's critical. And you keep that list. And when you do things, you make sure the people on that list know what you're doing. Networking is critical on Wall Street because it's so tough to get jobs. It's so competitive. You got to know. And it's great. The best thing that can happen is if you get a mentor. A mentor is somebody who believes you really got it because they're the ones that are going to lead you through the process. Create opportunities. Well, I have a buddy over at Salomon Brothers. I have a friend at Lehman Brothers. And then that's how you develop your network. Because one thing they love to hear when you're interviewing Wall Street, they don't want to hear your own interviews at Merrill Lynch. They want to hear that you have job. I mean, that's what Goldman Sachs used to do. You went for an interview at Goldman Sachs. The first thing they would say was, we want you to go interview 5 other investment firms and come back. What do they want to find out? What are they trying to find out? They're trying to find out if you can get those 5 other interviews, okay? That's the way they operate. They want to make sure that everybody thinks you got it, right? Know your strengths and weaknesses and how they relate to the job. We're going to talk about that. Key thing is you got to create something. And that's got to do this. You got to figure, okay, you got to figure out one thing Wall Street wants is focus. You go in there, you got to say, I want to trade bonds. You go in there and say, I want to trade derivatives. You go in there and say, I want to be a research analyst. They want to hear that focus. And part of what they want to say is, say you go in there and say, I want to trade bonds, okay? Well, one of your assignments is you're going to have to figure out what does it take to be a good bond trader, right? And when you go for an interview and you want to be a bond trader, then you have to make sure that you have the skills so that you know what those skills intersect, right? You have the skills to be a bond trader, and this is what it takes to be a bond trader. And you have to make sure you convince the people you're talking to that those two intersect, okay? So you got to know you got to know what your strengths are, what your skills are, and that's going to be one of your assignments as well, by the way. You got a lot of assignments in here. But part of that's going to be because they want to hear focus. You go in there. First of all, anybody who goes through this process knows you cannot walk in and not know if you want investment banking or sales and trading. I mean, if you don't know that, you get blown out the door right away, okay? You got to know right away what you want. Now, there's a lot of you know, you got to, so that means you got to go online. We're going to give you resources to go online to find different areas where you can read about different careers, know what it takes to be good in sales and trading versus other things. You go to the vault.com series, things like that. There's lots of different areas where you can go into. The other thing you're going to find is if you network and talk to people and work at Wall Street, you find about different job opportunities. You learn what it takes. And a lot of it's what you learn through this interview process. But up front, they're going to hear some degree of focus. Quality follow is important. I always tell students when they're going to interviews, get a card from anybody. The next day, they have to get a letter. Or the next day, they have to get an email. And you can't send the same email to 20 different people. Quality follow-up's important, okay? And it has to happen the next day. You don't wait for a week. You don't wait for 4 days. The next day. Why? Because that's what the competition does, okay? So just so you know, you got to do it right away. But the best way, and I suggest, make sure you get cards from everybody. The next day, everybody hears from you. Because that's what the competition does. And finally, you got to be confident. But you got to be prepared for rejection. You know, Wall Street doesn't attract people who lack confidence. You know, if you lack confidence, this is not where you want to be interviewing, right? You got to be confident because everybody there is confident. So you got to be confident as hell, but you know, you got to be prepared in case things don't work out. Okay, what are different strategies? Okay, great. I've seen a lot of different strategies work in terms of getting jobs because everybody has to have a unique little twist. You have to have somebody believe your story, but your story always works if you have a nice little twist to it. Develop an expertise in an area. I mean, the number of people I've seen use this. You know, Dave Rogers has given Penn State, you know, he's been one of our most successful alums over the last 25 years. You know, he tells a story that he understood equity derivatives before anybody else did in the mid-1980s. And he went to Goldman Sachs and told them how they could use equity derivatives to make money. He became an expert in equity derivatives. You know, it really helps if you become an expert in something. Study something in depth. You know, right now I think they're trading these carbon contracts. That would be a great thing to become an expert in. No one knows about, but everybody knows green is in. And now they're going to be trading these carbon contracts left and right. That would be a good thing to learn about. Use all possible entrees to jobs. You got cousins, relatives, friends, you name it. Use them all. Because everybody else is using them. You never feel guilty about it. I had a student, Bob Wall, was a great student. One year he had a tough year. He was interviewing for the jobs. Merrill Lynch didn't hire him. Everybody, he got turned down at J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs. He was a good student, a hardworking guy. He came to me, he said, you know, I got one other opportunity. I said, what's that? He says, my ex-girlfriend's dad is the CFO at IBM, and he likes me. I said, okay. So I said, you call him right away. Well, first thing you know, within 2 days, Bob, who'd been rejected by 3 different divisions at J.P. Morgan, had a phone interview with J.P. Morgan. Now, why would J.P. Morgan suddenly talk to Bob even though they'd flushed him down the toilet 3 times? Why would they talk to him? The CFO of IBM does a lot of financing, right? So J.P. Morgan's going to treat the CFO of IBM very well. He had a 10-minute job interview on the phone, got the offer. Now, he was an interesting story. Bob was a good guy. He was like from, everybody know up near Lake Wanapakak or something up near Scranton? It's like out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's on 84 on the way to nowhere, right? And interesting story. He gets this internship with J.P. Morgan. I tell Bob, before he goes, I say, Bob, I got 2 rules before you go to New York. This is for a summer job. Okay, you got 2 rules. I'm going to make it very simple for you. Rule number 1, you have to be the first one there in the morning. Guess what rule number 2 was? You got to be the last one there at night, too. He did that. And I said, summer's not going to be a lot of fun. He did that. At the end of the summer, his boss called me and said, well, we had 22 interns this summer. Bob ranked number 2 out of 22. And he was the only one from a public school. All the others were from Ivy League schools, right? So Bob came to my office. I congratulated him on his job. I said, Bob, you know, because he came out of the internship, they offered him a job, full-time job at J.P. Morgan. I looked at him and I said, Bob, your net present value just went up $5 million. Right? Because the opportunities that job creates, it's worth at least $5 million, right? So that's how important these things are. So use all entries. Seek out common ground. One of the things your resume has to say something about you. Say something. Maybe you were all-state in clarinet. Maybe you played soccer. Maybe you're a divisional chess champion. Common ground's important. When you go out to interview, the first thing you usually do is talk to Penn State grads, right? Now, part of your common ground is you went to Penn State. But maybe you went to York Catholic High School. Maybe that's another area of common ground. Think about all the areas, because your resume, you find common ground with people, it really, really helps. Okay? Finding common ground where you have similarities in terms of interests, activities is great. Avoid human resources. Make sure that if you do it right, you start interviewing, you use Penn State contacts, you interview with the people in investment banking, not with human resources. So the people in human resources tend to be tough to get through. Because they think they have to interview everybody from Princeton, this and that. You have to convince the people in sales and trading or in asset management. Human resources can be a tough area to go through. If you can, you have unique capabilities. Say you're extremely good in math. You have a minor in math. You have anything that's unique, which may give you a twist that somebody else has. You have to lever that. It's going to be in your resume. It's going to be part of what you talk about. Sometimes you use special skills to get a job, even though it's not the one you want. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit later, because there's a couple classic stories I can tell you about that. But sometimes you have to take the job that they offer you with the idea you're going to get through. Now, these are errors. One thing about Wall Street, you screw up, you get dumped. Okay? It's just you screw up, you get dumped. Number one, lack of follow-through. If you say you're going to do something, you got to do it. You got to do it tomorrow, if not today. If you say you're going to do something, you got to follow through with it. Number of times I hear Wall Street people say, "Well, he didn't follow through. He didn't do it." Okay? You got to follow through. You say you're going to do something, follow through is important. You got to look the part. You got to act the part. I had a student, great student at one point. A partner at Goldman Sachs called me and said, we're going to give him I won't mention his name. He said, we're going to give him a job. He went to his last interview at Goldman Sachs. He wore a sports coat. Why? Well, he didn't know any better. Guess what? Didn't get the job. You got to look the part. You got to act the part, right? No cancellations. You're always on time. If you have an excuse, well, I missed this, you don't cancel out. You're always on time. You can't be late. It doesn't matter if you missed the subway, whatever. You got to be there on time. Why? Because you can't make mistakes. Be persistent, but don't be a pain in the ass. There's a very fine line between those two. You can't go over that line. And I mean that. Persistency is important. You send 6, 7, 8 emails. You don't get a response. But eventually, as long as you're not a pain in the ass about it, they're going to appreciate your persistency. But you go over that line, guess what happens? You're done. You're through. You got to be persistent, but you got to understand you can't be a pain in the ass. Persistency, they love it. They always love it. But you got to do it in a way that they appreciate. You never put the ball in their court. In other words, they never owe you anything. The ball is always in your court. I mean, a number of times when I've heard alumni say, well, they expected me to do this, so they wanted me to do this for them. No, you never do that. That's a mistake. They feel they're doing you a favor in the first place. Don't put them where they think they think they owe you something. You never put the ball in the court. The ball is always in your court. It's always your responsibility. You have to believe that. Attention to detail is extremely important. Make sure you're sending an email. There's not a typographical error. They'll send them back. They'll correct them for you. There's no mistakes in grammar. Attention to detail, because this is the money business. You put an extra zero on something, it's a big mistake, okay? So attention to detail. You don't screw up anything. You don't misspell anything. You don't have any grammatical errors. Attention to detail is so important. you never apologize for going to Penn State. Ever. Okay? Because the person who asks you that, that's a test. It's a standard test they use. Because then they think, well, if you go to Merrill, you're apologizing because you're not at Goldman Sachs, right? You never apologize. In fact, what I always say, you stay positive. Somebody says, well, if you wanted to work at Wall Street, why did you go to Penn State? Right away, you take that and make it a positive. Well, I had a great situation at Penn State. I had a great opportunity. I was able to do this and that and this and that. Right? You turn that into a positive. You never apologize for where you went to school or who you are. Anytime a question like that, you make it a positive. The last one is a classic. You don't flush the John. I had a gal, one of my former students working at J.P. Morgan, Penn State student she liked. She was trying to help him. One day in the middle of the afternoon, she's working, it's busy. She gets a call from him, and 10 seconds into the call, she hears the commode flush. She was appalled. Why would somebody call me when they're sitting on the commode, right? And the reason I tell you that story is you can't make those mistakes. But she was appalled to think that somebody would call her from the John. You know, she was insulted. And that was the end of him. Bang, he was done. Don't flush the John, okay? Know the structure. Okay, and these are basic things. You've got to know the firm, the culture, the weaknesses. There's plenty of sources. We'll list sources where you can go and read about Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, that sort of thing. Know what it takes to be successful. If you want to go into investment banking, you've got to know what it takes to be successful in investment banking. If you want to go into underwriting, you want to go into derivatives, you've got to understand what are the key things, you know, and you do this, you find this by reading about the jobs, you find this by talking to people who work the jobs, right? What does it take to be successful as a research analyst, or what does it take to be successful as a trader? One of the things I always do, these people are in the investment business. At some point you go in an interview, they're going to find out, they're going to say something like, you know, give me a stock you like. And you got to talk for a while. Give me an investment idea you like. You know, perfect example. And you should make sure you have a connection. Don't tell them General Electric. Nobody understands General Electric. You got to tell them something. And find a connection between you and the stock. Great story was I had a gal working for me. She's an interview at Goldman Sachs. First question, you know, this is the investment business. They want to know what you know about the markets and that sort of thing. First question, the guy says, tell me a stock you like. She says, Callaway Golf. And he says, he pulls it up on the screen, why do you like Callaway Golf? Well, I'm on the Penn State golf team, and I know a lot about drivers. And they're coming out with a new driver, blah, 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 blah. And she talks for 20 minutes, and she gets a job. Why? They want to hear what you know and your ideas. Now, that means it may not be stock. If you like fixed income, you like bonds or commodities, you got to follow certain markets. Like if you like currencies, that sort of thing, you got to follow the euro or the yen. If you like commodities, you got to follow oil or something like that. You got to find out. You got to establish a depth of knowledge so you can talk about this stuff, because they want to know something. You want to convince them you're an expert in something. Okay. So one of the things I say, if any student, I say, follow 3 stocks or 3 good investment ideas, okay? And know them to death. Because at some point in this business, when you're in an interview, they're going to say to you, you know, give me an idea. And man, if you can talk about an idea for 10 or 15 minutes and make it sound convincing, it's all about the story, right? Know their firm deals. Hey, if you're interviewing with Merrill Lynch, you should know what underwritings they've done, anything recently. That's going to impress them, because maybe they were working on them, right? Or they're trying to sell them. You got to know the numbers. You got to know where the markets are. You know, the first thing, you go to interview at Goldman Sachs, they're going to say, what's Goldman trading for today? They want to know. Do you know it? You know, that's simple stuff. But that's assumed you know that. What's the price of oil? What's the price of gold? And what's going on? You got to know the numbers. This is the markets. They want to know the markets. And finally, build your financial skills toolbox. Finance is all about skills. You know, we have opportunities here today we didn't have 5 or 10 years ago. We have the trading room, Bloomberg. We teach classes in Bloomberg, in Reuters. If you have that on your resume, that you use Reuters, you use Bloomberg, your stock price goes up. Why? because they don't have that at most other schools, okay? So we have opportunities here through PSIA, through the Lion Fund, through the trading room. You can build your financial skills toolbox so you're more competitive. We didn't have those in the past. We have them now. Okay, this is going to be your assignment. What time is it?
10 to 6.
I told you you're going to be on here by 6, didn't I? Okay. Now, I'm going to put this is a list of things. Just over the years, these are things I suggest. Don't worry about writing it down. We're going to put it online. Next week, we're going to put a quiz online, okay? Because you got to know this stuff. If you're really committed to this program, then I'm going to make sure you have to do it, okay? Now, your self-help list. These are things I want you to work on. We're going to have this online. You can look at it. You know, what is your story? What is your 3-point speech? Give me 3 investment opportunities. You've got to research these. You know, what are they? Maybe a stock, a bond, maybe an emerging market to a good investment. But you've got to have a step. You've got to have just 3 ideas. We'll list the best-known books. You know, it all starts with Liar's, Poker, and that sort of thing. But they assume you've read this stuff. If you haven't read it, you're not competitive, okay? You got to know the investment banking, you know, the business, that sort of thing. We'll have some sources there. What type of job do you think you want to do? Now, you got to read Vault.com. You got to kind of get into this. So you start at some point. You have to figure out what do you think you want, because they want to hear that. You can't go walk into Merrill Lynch and say, I want a job at Merrill Lynch, without telling them what job you want. Okay? So you got to have focus, but you got to be a little flexible. It's a little game you have to play, but you know you got it, and you got to know what it takes to be successful. But they want to hear focus, so you got to be ready for that. Build your financial toolbox. Bloomberg, Reuters, it's there. It's easy. We teach classes in it. Make sure you sign up for those. You put that in your resume, your stock price goes up. Okay. When you're prepared, not before you're prepared, when you're prepared, then you start working with Robin and the rest of us in terms of building your network. Find out, am I wrong? Or I guess I thought, oh my God, oh, okay. We just lost our lights. Okay, we're good to go. I kept thinking, man, it's getting dark in here. But when you're ready, you start to network. You know, you can't do it here in State College. You got to go there. We have events. Every 6 months we have a Wall Street Initiative event. If I'm a Penn State student, I know that's coming up. I get my butt up there and I show up there. Do you get invited? Maybe not. You show up anyhow. You know why? All you're doing is meeting these alumni, and they love that. They love Penn State students. They know what it takes to get from here to there, but you got to get your butt up there, okay? And you know, or you go to the alumni office, say I'll take tickets or I'll work the desk, you know. But you get there and you build networks and you get people's cards. That's how you get it started. But you can't do it sitting in State College. You got to get your butt up there. But once you kind of have your skill set up, you're prepared to go, you got to make sure you get to these events in New York. And there you meet alumni because you have common ground with them. You're a student, they were a student here. They understand it. They understand it's tough to get there. I mean, we have students. We had a gal, Allison Pavlik. She's from Homer City. Anybody where Homer City is? Where's Homer City? East of Pittsburgh. Yeah, it's like out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, and she got an investment banking job last year at Goldman Sachs. I mean, at Merrill Lynch. Do you know how far it is culturally? I mean, the difference between investment banking in New York City and Homer Center is, I mean, most people say you can't get from there to there, but you can, okay? She just did everything the right way. You know, she worked in the trading room. She did the thing. The key thing I understand is you can do it. It's not that. Attention to detail. You got to get. Everybody's got to get better at that. That's so important. Perfect your resume. Robin's going to help you do that. I always say develop an expertise in an area. So you can talk about, you know, credit derivatives forever, because it's great when you're an expert and you're talking to people and you know more about these things than they do. It impresses the hell out of them. You know, take on a project, learn something like that. Develop a depth of knowledge. It's something you have an interest in. Read the relevant periodicals. You've got to read, like Bloomberg Markets is a great, it's over in the trading room. Read that. It's a great thing. And be involved. They want to see leaders. Okay? Now, we're going to have a few quizzes in here where one thing you're going to have to do, you go on Angel, you search for the group in Angel. The title of the group is Smeal Wall Street Boot Camp. Okay? So you go to Angel, you look for groups, you search for the group. The one you're looking for is Smeal Wall Street Boot Camp. You sign up for it. We're not going to sign you up. You have to take the initiative. You have to sign up for it, okay? And we're going to have a few quizzes in there. All these quizzes are giving you an indication of things you should know. And, you know, you're going to be able to cheat your butt off in those quizzes. You're going to get a chance to take them a couple times. You know, of those of you who've taken my 301 class, right? You're allowed to cheat. I encourage you to cheat, right? Well, guess what? You're supposed to cheat on these things. What these quizzes are intended to do is just to make sure you're aware of things you've got to know. Who's leading the league tables in equity underwriting, things like that. You may have to look them up. But the thing is all we're intending to do is help to build your financial knowledge. Things we should expect you should know, okay? So we're going to have some online quizzes, and what we're meant to do is to help you out, just things you're supposed to know. But it's also an indication of you're accountable to this program. Because if you do this, we're going to help you out. Now, if I talk to alumni on Wall Street, and they say, Penn State students, when they come through, what are the keys to success? And this is important, because this is something you have to ask yourself. Number one is passion. You have to like this stuff. You really have to like this stuff, okay? You have to enjoy this stuff. Last night there was a PSI meeting over in the business auditorium, and a bunch of students were playing Jeopardy Finance. It was hilarious. But those people like this stuff, right? You gotta like it. If you don't have a passion for it, go major in marketing or logistics, okay? You gotta have a passion for it, because that's going to make you have a commitment to it. They want people who are committed, because people who are committed will do the right thing. So you really have to think of, is this what you want to do? Because you can't do this halfway. You got to do it the whole way. If you want to maximize the probability, and that's all you can really do, of you going from here to there, you have to have a passion for it. You have to have a commitment to it. Because in the end, you got to prepare and execute. In the end, what you're going to have to do is prepare as we've laid some things out for you, and then pursue those jobs, okay? That's the key thing. But if you don't have a passion or commitment to this, there's no reason to do it. The competition's too high, right? The competition is very tough. So the only reason, if you want this type of job, you have to have passion and commitment, because that will lead to your preparation and execution, okay? I like to finish with Napoon's Law. You guys don't know what Napoon's Law is. Napoon Ramaya was a student of mine 15 years ago. Napoon came to the United States from India. He had no job experience. He had no green card. He was a little guy, had no stature, no presence. He comes in my office one day and says, Dr. Woolrich, I want to get a job on Wall Street. I said, Napoon, let me see your resume. And I looked at his resume, and it was pitiful. I mean, I almost started laughing. But in the next 9 months, Napoon went through a program where I've never seen anybody go from here to there. It was incredible. No green card, no work experience. He worked one summer on a computer in a bank in India. And over those 9 months, he went through. This guy knew persistence without being a pain in the ass better than any student I've ever seen. This guy knew how to build networks better than anybody I've ever seen, just in terms of people. He was such a nice guy, had such a great presence in terms of dealing with people. He was so well prepared for every interview. He knew every bank. He knew their culture. He was so well prepared. He became an expert in derivatives. And it was so funny because after 9 months of this, and the woman who ran recruiting at Merrill Lynch was a woman by the name of Amy Margolis, who was well known in every business school in the country over about a decade's time. Amy Margolis calls me one day, and she said, Randy, I have absolutely the best news you could ever imagine. I said, what's that? She says, I'm going to offer Nipun Ramaya a job at Merrill Lynch. I mean, she was almost crying because this guy did everything the right way. He came here to the United States from India. He had no job, no work experience, no green card. And he went from there, and they offered him a job at Merrill Lynch. Now, the best of the story, the rest of the story is even better. Nipun, I mean, I would have given him a 0% probability when I first met him. And he takes a job on Wall Street. Well, they gave him a job as a techie, a back office guy, because they liked him so much. 3 months into his job, I get a call from Nipun. Says, Dr. Woolridge says, I want to work in derivatives research. And I knew somehow he would pull it off. So what he started doing is every day his computer job would end at 5 o'clock. He would go up to the 22nd floor and hang out with the guys who were doing derivatives research. 3 months later, I get a call. Dr. Woolridge, I just got a job in derivatives research. Didn't surprise me at all, right? This guy knew what he was doing. 6 months later, he calls, Dr. Woolridge, I think I want to be a trader. So what does Nipun do? He goes down and starts hanging out with the traders, right? 3 months later, he calls, Dr. Woolridge, I'm now trading. Nipun is now a top trader for Merrill Lynch in London. He trades currencies. But when I met Nipun and I looked at his background, no green card, no work experience, it was like you never would have expected he could go from there to there. But all you have to do is do things the right way. What we're going to do is give you ideas about what you need to do and how you can build it. I want to finish with one thing. Who's Vince Lombardi? Greatest football coach of all. He coached for who? The Packers. Now, was Favre there when he was there? No. He wasn't there. That's a good quiz question. I almost asked it. Final thought on this. He used to, one of his said, our goal is perfection. However, perfection is not attainable. But in the pursuit of perfection, we can achieve excellence. The competition for these jobs doesn't come from East Stroudsburg or Slippery Rock. Right? That's why you have to pursue excellence, because you got to be good at this stuff. But just as in Nipun's law, it can be done. As long as you have the passion for it, the commitment to it, and you prepare and execute. Okay? So, this is the beginning of our program. We'll see how many of you stick with it, okay? We'll see you in 2